Can y'all hear me fine? That's cool. Gotcha.
Yeah, man, I got like 2%, so I
shit.
can't actually. Yeah, man, I'm sorry. I can't come to the meeting, but man, thank you very much for everything you do, man. You're the best. Thank you.
Brother, I appreciate you, man. You know, it's good to have you here, bro.
You too, man. Good to talk to you, man. My honor. Thank you.
Yeah, man. You know, I don't know, Dora, if you were able. I don't know if you were here, but we just gave Ori Shed Jr. from us.
Oh, yeah, let's go.
I appreciate it very much.
Welcome.
Man.
Yeah, man.
I appreciate it very much, man. Thank you very much, man, for everything.
Yeah, man. Some knowledge, you know, we're just trying to learn it. What's up, Cameron?
Yeah. Right. Thank you, guys.
Yes,
Thank you. Have a good time. Thank you.
You too, bro. What's up, Cameron?
What's the word?
Hey, what's up, man?
Nothing to it. It's the old man trying to plug his shit in. You know what's happening. Put some light on the subject. All right.
Hey, there we go.
Let's go, man. Let's go.
Perfect.
What's going on?
Everything's good, man. It took us a minute, but I'm glad we're here.
Yeah, for sure. You caught me in the shed for real. That's what I've been at all day there. I've been in there all morning.
Let's go. Well, that'd be dope. That'd be dope to get at some point like a clip of you doing that. Before we even get on there, I was gonna do like a screenshot of me and you on the actual call, and then like put it on Instagram so people know we're in here.
All right.
I will collab post you. Do it right now. All right, I got that. Give me a couple seconds just to do this real quick.
All right.
How's it been, bro? You've been playing, right? You were playing earlier.
Just shedding all day. You know, it's funny. I had the last few weeks have been pretty intense. So you know, in the '90s, there was a guy named David Passick was my manager. He also managed Herbie Hancock and a bunch of other people, and he had we were all at Verve together. And then, you know, I got custody of my sons in 2001, and Verve kind of fell apart. And I had, you know, Herbie and Passick started a label, and I made a few records for them through Sony. And then I took some time away from recording and having a career to just be the father of two little boys. They were 11 years old and 8. And we lived here in Jersey City, and I had my parents with me. My father had Alzheimer's, so I had taken my parents in. And so that's what I did, you know. So, you know, recently Passick and I reconnected, and we're part of I'm part of an organization we started called Evolve Music. It's a label and a production company, and reunited with the guitar player I used to record with back in the day, a guy named JK, and Pino Palladino was in on it, the trumpet player named Takuya, and together we're recording and producing a bunch of records and doing everything. And so it's just been a blitz of recording and studio work. And I've been blessed to be able to call on a bunch of my very good friends. First I had Bernice Travis and Mike Mitchell and my son Davis play on a record that we did for JK, and then I had Mike Mitchell and James Genus and Davis play on my new record, and then this collaborative record that JK and I are doing. I just had Genus and Ray Angry and Gene Lake. And for young people who don't know who Gene Lake is, Gene Lake's drum sound, his playing and his drums, that's the sound of neo soul from the 90s. That's the two of us on Brown Sugar. That's him on Erykah Badu's records. That's him on Michelle Ndegeocello's first two records. Basically everything that Bob Power produced in the 90s, he had Gene Lake play drums on it. So you can hear that metal snare, two whacks in the snare, you knew you listened to Gene. And Gene and I went to Berkeley together. So that's how far we go back. We go back to 1984, 85, something like that. And so we got these cats together. We recorded, we basically recorded 15 tracks in 2 days, Sunday and Monday. Right. So that was heavy. And then Corey Henry came, and Corey Henry played on a track with us. And so then me, Corey, and Genus went down to New Blue Monday night and helped Ray Angry celebrate his 5-year anniversary of his Producer Mondays at New Blue. So we did that. And then by Tuesday, man, I was sick as a dog. I woke up Tuesday with a fever, man. I was sick in bed. I woke up Tuesday sick, went back to bed, woke up yesterday thinking it was Thursday. That's how heavy the fever was. I woke up Wednesday, texted. I was like, hey man, I don't think I'm gonna be able to make the gig tonight. I was like, what gig? And I was like, oh my bad. Well, let me just press reset, figure out where I am, and get my head together. So I'm happy to report that I'm back on the block this morning, feeling like my old self. I've been shedding, went out for a ride on my skateboard and all that. So I'm good to go, ready to hit the Django tonight. Yeah, it's gonna be good. I got Stacey Dillard's playing, and Mark Lewandowski and Evan Sherman's playing. We gonna have a good time. It'll be cool. You know what it's like, fam. Is when you're in town, you up there with me, so you know what it is.
Exactly. It's funny because I just was talking to Stacey like a couple of days ago. We did In the Shed like 2 days ago.
Oh, that's what's up.
Yeah, man, that's fun. So I'm posting it right now. Check my story to join, and for lessons with Mark Whitfield and channel live DM me.
All right, let me know what I'm supposed to do.
I think it's up. So once you accept it,
okay. Oh, I see it. Okay, cool. Yeah, we're good. All right. Accept, yes.
And then add the link.
Full show. All right, we're good to go.
Perfect. I'm just adding the link here.
Cool.
Link. Bam.
So it's funny, man. I was like to figure out where cats are when they do this. So as you can see, I'm in what used to be Davis's bedroom.
Oh, right? Really? You got the piano too.
Davis moved out, man. So now old piano's still here. You see, I got a skateboard rack. You can't really see these guitars everywhere over here. Guitars everywhere. But yeah, his bedroom has been completely appropriated. It is now record a home studio, practice room, man cave.
Yeah, I love it.
Where are you at?
I'm in the Bahamas right now. I'm actually in my mentor's crib. This is why I usually come too. Every time I come back to the Bahamas. I just came back like 2 days ago.
No, good. Okay.
Yeah, man.
Beautiful.
Finishing this up here in the Shed.live. The socials, man, it's a whole other thing now.
Hey, man, listen, it's a funny thing. I often tell people media was never meant to be social, but the fact that it is something that cannot be changed. And so now it's the challenge of all of us who actually have something to share. That's what I consider to be media worthy, and that's not to say not to cast any shade or any dispersion on people who just want to share the details of their everyday lives. It's just that I came up at a time when advertising, you had to compete and pay for advertising space. So when you had something to present, the question for you was, well, is what I'm trying to present serious enough to me to invest in, right? Like, because if I'm going to take an ad out in the New York Times or in this magazine, or if I'm going to buy this radio ad, you know, this is a sizable investment. But it's that investment alone that makes it clear to everyone who may come across it that this is at least that serious to me. And now it's just, you know, I can kind of roll over in my bed and I got a bowl of Rice Krispies and, you know, and I'm like, hey, what's up, y'all? And that, you know, and that gets as much attention on my feed as, you know, something I may have spent a year in the process composing, arranging, and recording. And whether or not it's fair or right, that has nothing to do with it. It's just factual. It just is what it is. So whatever we have to do to draw extra attention or special attention to set these projects aside. Because listen, I'll be open to more time. But hey, I'm an old man on a skateboard, hoping I don't see a comedian. You know, when I'm out here, you know what I mean? Like that, you know, that's a thing. But when we do something, we have this is our only outlet. Because if I buy an ad in the New York Times now, only 18 people are going to see it, right? So there is no more of that, right? So I'm you know, slowly but surely, I'm learning how to, you know, to find my way, navigate my way through the game. And I have a partner in social media that I want to shout out. His name is Paul Bay, and Paul has helped me to really get on my game and kind of drag me along, kicking and screaming all the way. And I'm grateful for it. And so I appreciate you, man. I'm proud of what you're doing because you found a way to carve out a niche for yourself. And that's a conduit, and you're using the portal not only to present what you do, but as part of presenting the community. And the community is open to anyone who takes themselves and what we do seriously enough to want to belong. And that's a beautiful sentiment. And so I'm proud of you, and I congratulate you for that.
Oh man, thank you, brother. Man, it's amazing to have you here. You know, I think this is what it's all about, you know, talking to the people. Like you talk about community, you're one of the people that I consider to be, you know, one of the pillars of the community. Like I see you everywhere, bro. I see you in the New York, you know, like scene, like more than I see most people. And I was talking to Stacy about this because Stacy is also another one of those guys that are really, you know, active on the scene. And you know, it takes effort, you know, and also he talked about how, you know, it keeps him on his toes and how he learns being on the scene that much, right? And,
Yeah, sure.
and I'm sure you already have a busy schedule yourself, so it's like, you know, it takes the love for it, you know, to be able to like be there and to, you know, connect with the new up and coming, you know, artists. And so, you know, I'm gonna ask you the same question I asked him. I asked him, like, what does community means to you, and what do you think of the New York City jazz community and the jazz scene in general?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, and I'm so glad that you said that you framed all of your statements and your question that way, because it shines a light on an interesting change in perspective. So I started coming to New York, even though I grew up on Long Island. I was a suburban kid. I moved away when I was 15. And then when I graduated from Berkeley, I was 20, but I had already started making trips to New York City from Boston just to sit in and, you know, and I knew Philip and Bernard Harper. And so I started playing with them at the Blue Note, like the late night jam sessions. Because the city was different back then. The Blue Note had a jam session that went, well, not a jam session, but Philip and Bernard led a quintet that they would let some cats sit in that they knew you. That was Tuesday through Sunday from 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. And I was very fortunate that when I actually got out of school and moved to Brooklyn, Philip hired me. And so I used to play alongside Philip and Justin Robinson, you know, and Leon Parker played drums in the band. You know, various guys played in the group. But so here's the thing. It's funny now, you know, when you say, well, man, I see you out more, I see you, you know, so every night without fail, if I went to Barry Harris's Jazz Workshop, or if I went to Bradley's, which is another, you know, a late night spot where the cats would hang, every night I would see Ronnie Matthews, perhaps Tommy Flanagan. I saw Art Blakey, Walter Davis, you know, from Memphis, who just recently passed.
Harold Mayburn.
Oh, Mayburn. I see, I see Mabes. You see Ron Carter. You see just a whole host. Every night. Us as young, I was 20, 21 years old. We as young, this is me and Roy and McBride and Hutchinson and all the guys in our crew. We were the minority. We were the flies on the wall. The scene wasn't ours, it was theirs. Like they went out every night and worked and played, and then they got together and they communed about what they did. They talked about the music, they talked about their journey. If I was, I remember my first time, or one of the first times, having my own gig at Bradley's. I want to shout out Wendy Cunningham, because she kept the club going after her husband passed, and with the help of Larry Clothier, and they gave us all, a place to play, to get started. I remember closing, how I do. I closed my eyes and playing, and opened my eyes, and I thought I was having a nightmare. I opened my eyes, and at the bars in front of me was Connie Kay and Milt Jackson and Percy Heath. And to my left was Tommy Flanagan, and he was sitting next to Kenny Barron, and then George Benson and Joe Sample walked in together, and they just walked into the club. It was like 2 a.m. They were just, so it turns out that MJQ was playing. They were filling in for Bobby Short for an entire month at the Carlisle. So every night, with the exception of John Lewis, the cats would come down to Bradley's and hang out. One night, Percy Heath came in arm in arm with Shaka Khan, singing it. You just never, But like I said, we were visitors. We were newcomers to their scene. They showed us the way. They showed us how to behave, how to carry ourselves, how to be prepared. When someone invited you to play, there was an etiquette to how you handled yourself. Like all these things, it was like we didn't need a rule book, because we were just watching it happen in real time. On several occasions, Art Blakey said to me, he'd say, "Oh, young man, I need you to be at rehearsal on Thursday." And then when Thursday would come, would have no idea who I was. But the point was, it wasn't about whether or not he meant be ready. It was when Walter Davis and Donald Harrison finally took me over to Sweet Basil Smith to sit in with him. I knew the book. I was prepared to play, because I didn't wait for him to hire me to try to figure out what songs I had to learn. You want to play with somebody, you learn their music, you show up, you're prepared to play. And so the community was a living, it has always been a living, breathing entity, and the people that we together, we breathe life into it. It's not about the venues or the spaces, although there have always been magical places, in places that, but it's us, it's the love we have for each other. It's the tension that comes from healthy competition. Listen, I remember one night playing. I was playing with my band at the Blue Note. I was double billing for a week with me and Stanley Turn Team. His band and my band. So we was playing a week, and was it Turn Team? Yeah, it was. So I'm double this time with Turn Team, and Russell Malone was playing with Norman Simmons, and I forget who's playing bass over at Bradley's. And so, that Russell, that's my man, right? And so we can finish playing at the Blue Note, and I'm coming from the Blue Note, so man, I'm, got a little extra swag, to me, right? And I walk into Bradley's, and Russell saw me, and Russell called me up on stage. I mean, I hadn't even sat out. He called me up on stage, and I was like, oh shit. And he called Cherokee right here, and just went off. And I was like, well, I can't bottle no applause from the Blue Note, bring with me. I better play, I would be laughed out this motherfucker, right? So that's just what it was, and so I think I played the best at the best fashion of my entire life in that moment. And when it was over, I looked through, and Russell, he thought he had me. First, he just knew he had me, right? And so after he played, I was like, oh God, I played right behind him. But I played. When it was over, I was like, man, whoo, I didn't think I was going to make it. He said, well, you didn't have no choice. And then we just hugged, and that was it, Like, I knew what he was trying to do. Wasn't no vibe. It's like, hey, man, if you're not prepared, don't come in. Go home. But don't, don't come out with your feelings hurt. Like, everyone that was there that night was better off for what happened. And that's, because we all saw what happens when you love what you do and you love one another. It wasn't that wrong. I wasn't trying to kick my ass. Cause, well, just stand up, be counted, man. It's funny. We always had a little thing going because I live here in Jersey City and I had just moved into the neighborhood. We're talking about like 99. I just moved in and I was having a bunch of gear delivered. I'm just getting situated with that. And the mailman knocks on the door of my apartment, open the door, and it's the mailman. He's like, he's an older dude. He kind of looked over his glasses. He's like, "Oh, are you the guitar player, Mark Whitfield?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he said, "Oh man, I play a little guitar." We talked for a second. He's like, Russell Malone lives down the street. And I was like, "Yeah, I know." He said, "Well, he's practicing right now." And I was like, I get my shit. Give me my shit. Get out of here, man. You better not come around here with your head out at Christmas time. What's wrong with you? And I called Russell and cussed him out, But that's just, so to me, the community is, and I understand why things are different now because, and when I say different, I mean in terms of the way that we approach things or how we know one another. Because learning to play and being a part of a scene that starts in school, at university, has now become a big part of what we do. And and my generation was probably the beginning of that. Like when I got to Berkeley, I know, Branford and Kevin Eubanks and Donald Harrison and Gene Jackson and, Billy Kilson and guys like that had and Wallace Roney and Greg Osby, those cats, they were at Berkeley, in Cyrus Chestnut. They were there in the 3 or 4 years prior to William Calhoun from Living Color. Like they were all there. Some of them were still there when I got there, but that was the beginning of what I like to call that Young Lions jazz culture, for my generation, right? And all those cats sort of moved into the Fort Greene neighborhood in Brooklyn. So when I got out of school, that's I moved in Fort Greene, and so I could literally walk around the corner and go to Terrence Blanchard's apartment and have him whoop by us with some music he wrote and some changes I couldn't play, and then go around and go to Donald Harrison's apartment because they had a band together and I played with them sometimes. Then I'd go to Donald Harrison's apartment and he would take then he would take out all of his horns and whoop my ass on each one of them. He'd be like, "Man, play confirmation," and he'd play it on the flute, then alto, and then C melody. He was the first one to ever see somebody play a C melody, and so there was, but it just feels like because we didn't have school and then life, we just had, we all went to school, but our musical education sort of took place when we got to, like to me, living in Brooklyn, that was my grad school. That's where I learned the finer points of things, and I had time to put together so much of the stuff that I had learned while I was in school. And the other part of that is too, growing up without the internet, like we were, before all that, we didn't have a lot of the information that so many young musicians have now when they get to college. They already, I was, when I got to Berkeley, my record collection, I had 19 records. I had 19 vinyls. That's all the music I owned, right? And so I used to buy record stores. I used to buy records at Looney Tunes, used record store around the corner from Berkeley, 99 cents for used records. That's where I bought a Love Supreme or Impressions or, Witch Doctor, that's where I bought all that. I got my first Wes Montgomery record when I got to Berkeley, at 16. So we were, the scales of time moved a little bit slower for us. But thankfully, the community was there. So now, so many, I taught at Berkeley for a little while. I taught at Juilliard for a bit. And I taught at the New School a little bit. I understand that so many students, so many young musicians now come together in school, and that helps them to build. It just, sometimes it looks like it turns into cliques as opposed to turning into an entire community. And so I'm always, it always makes me happy. It makes me happier when I see a larger group of musicians coming from different areas, from different schools of thought, from wherever it is, coming together to make music and enrich the scene, because that's really what it's always been about.
Yeah. Wow. So I guess from what I'm hearing, it seems like you can appreciate both. You know, you being someone that experienced both, you can appreciate both for different things.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah. Wow, man. You know, it's interesting to talk about this because I think, you know, I want to take it back because we talked a little bit about this at Django, but you know, one of the first videos I saw of you, you know, was, you know, that iconic band, the Jazz Features, you know, Hargrove, and you know,
Yeah.
a lot of that period with the Young Lions, and you know, that was a time, man. And a lot of the times, like when we think about it, you know, we gotta say the '90s was a special time, man. '90s in jazz was a special time, and you know, you being someone that was around then, I just wanted to hear more and give other people a chance to hear what you have to say about that too. You know.
Yeah, you know, so here's the thing. You know, someone says y'all talking about Django Reinhardt. We were talking at the Django, the club, the other night, but we'll definitely talk about Django though for sure. Yeah. So the '90s was interesting, right? Because the '70s had been this period where you know, there had been so many so much commercial attention paid to music that came from jazz. You know, jazz related music. You know, the fusion explosion. Like when I talk, you know, I thank goodness I just got to spend a lot of time with Lenny White and musicians of his generation. You know, from his circle. He's like, man, you have to understand something. Return to Forever, we played stadiums. He's like, we didn't play large clubs or theaters. We played in front of 15, 20,000 people at night. We were like rock stars. So when you think about a group like that, you know, or Weather Report, or you know, or just groups that had that, you know, while that was happening in the '70s, you still had the Messengers playing at clubs like Sweet Basil. Dexter Gordon was out here playing, and you know, Benny Golson, you know, and Grant Green was making. You just had you had, it was McCoy Tyner, you know, all that great shit you see with McCoy, Gary Bartz, and Jack D. Snap playing, and Sonny Rollins was there, Joe Henry, like all these cats are playing, you know. But you got Mahavishnu and you know, and these cats playing and living like rock stars, right? And so the '70s, you know, for a large part of the jazz scene, the '70s was starting to just kind of, you know, the '70s was eating away at some of what the heart of the scene was about. And so I always like to show a special amount of love and appreciation to the fortitude and the commitment of musicians who went into that decade not being heralded with the fanfare of the press, and survived, you know, survived playing, teaching, doing whatever they had to do to keep not only their own careers going, but they were true believers. You knew they had to be true believers because there was no immediate reward, you know. And so then the '80s comes around, and you know, due in large part to the dedication of Art. You know, Art Blakey was relentless in his determination to continue to recruit and feature the brightest young musicians he could find. He knew what the purpose of it was. It wasn't that the young cats were the best players. It was that having someone 18, 19, 20 years old who played that well would get people's attention and draw attention to the fact that these young people were just beginning their journey into the extension of this beautiful art form. And he was relentless with that. He didn't. It wasn't a gimmick. It was not some hidden agenda. He would tell you right away why they were there. And then he said, as soon as they get too good to be here, I kick them out and bring somebody else in, because that's what we do here. And and so seeing Wynton and Brent, seeing Wynton come in with Bobby Watson and Billy Pierce, and then Branford coming on, and then seeing that turn into Terrence and Donald and Toussaint and Bone, that had a lot to do with the press, the New York City and the music press in general, paying attention to the fact that there were still people out here playing jazz in a classical, in its classical form, like not for the stadium crowd, not for the fanfare, but literally, for the furthering of the music and making sure that they were constantly pointing to the history and the lineage to reinforce the legitimacy of the music and how necessary it is, right? Because a lot of the musicians, even jazz who received accolades and fanfare at that time, weren't always, I remember as a kid, I saw bands like, I saw Woody Herman, I saw Maynard Ferguson, and you didn't hear them talk about the people they came up with. In private, you heard, I saw Jerry Mulligan, I knew who he was, but you didn't hear him talk about Monk, you didn't hear him talk about these musicians. You just saw him enjoying his fame and fortune. Nothing wrong with that, but thank goodness there was somebody who did, and so that's, that led it, and so I remember when I got a scholarship to go to Berkeley, I hadn't intended to go into playing music. I don't come from a family of musicians, and I had in high school earned a scholarship to go to Georgetown University. One of my older brothers had gone there for undergrad and law school, had become a lawyer, and so I had an opportunity to go there, and my intention was to, enter the pre-med program, and I had a scholarship to go, and I also got the scholarship to go to Berkeley, and I was going to graduate. I graduated from high school at 16, so I'm early. I convinced my parents through, it was no small feat, let me tell you, to let me go to Berkeley and try and see. I'm young. If it doesn't work out, I'll transfer. I'll go someplace else for college. Whatever. Not that it was that flippant. I just really wanted to go, and I knew they didn't want me to. So they, and it wasn't that they didn't believe in music. They had raised me to be. My parents took me to see Duke Ellington, with Duke conducted the band, with Cal Basie. I saw Ella Fitzgerald and Joe Pass and Oscar Peterson as a little kid. That was their fault that I loved the music, but they wanted me to love it from a distance, and you just can't control that, right? But I remember the year before, so I enrolled at Berkeley in September of 1983, right? And I had just seen Wynton on, Miles and Wynton on the Grammys. By the time I might be a little bit off, so any historians out there, feel free to correct me. But I feel like the Grammys had happened in February of '83 is when Miles beat Wynton. But he didn't talk. He just came out and kind of whispered, and held his trumpet up and did some shit and walked off, And I can hear my mom now. See, that man still just don't talk to nobody. Right. right. And then but I was like, man, who was that other dude? I didn't know anything about Whitney. Like I said, it didn't have any. There was no medium for something that wasn't front page news just yet, right? And so, but then when I got to Berkeley, Delphio Marcellus enrolled the same time I did, and I was like, I don't know who this loud so and so is, but he must be able to play, or he must know somebody can play or something, Anyway, it didn't take long before he made sure we all knew who his brothers were and what they were doing. And I remember, Delphio's first recital in the fall or the spring. If he's listening or somebody knows, he'll have to correct me. Fall or the spring of that year, Wynton and Ellis, their father, came up to the school, and I remember by that point we had all become aware of Think of One and whatever. And I remember Delphio brought Charnette Moffett to play at his recital, and Charnette and I were the same age, and so he came, and I was like a young, energetic, crazy dude like me. So we got to be friends, and through hanging out with him and seeing Delphio and meeting Wynton and seeing Alice, I was like, oh man, not only do these cats, is this inspiring? I might actually get to be really good one day, but I might not have to be broke either. Like I might actually get paid to play some music. man, this is amazing. Well, let me get on this right away, and see a little bit more about what these cats have to say. But all they had to say was, it's rough out here, man. So you got no time to bullshit. And I remember, and so I was fortunate to, fortunate for one thing, because there weren't a lot of guitar players at the time trying to play in in that particular style. So especially young guitar players, I remember when I moved back to New York as an aspiring musician, the only folks, it was me, Peter Bernstein, and Freddie Bryant. There were other guitar players, older people. Russell Malone wasn't here; he was in Atlanta. And you met him a few years later. But like that was a deal. That was a thing. I had the opportunity to be involved in a lot of things just because I didn't have a lot of competition for spots, right? But man, it was rough, and I remember, seeing Wynton with his quartet at the Blue Note. I want to say this would have to have been the fall of '89, something like that, and every night, it was him, Marcus Roberts, Bob Hurst, and Tane, and Veal might have been sitting in at the time. Maybe they were getting ready to make that switch. And I just remember, every night, because I was playing in the late night band, so I could go to see him play first. Right? Every night, man, it'd be like Freddie would be coming to get him, or Faddis would come. It was just like, it's just, and then, after a while, when I started playing, you look up and you see George Benson out there, or Rodney Jones, or like, oh God, the truth was all around you. So there was, you had this, so the early '90s, and I'm getting to the more direct answer to your question, but I'm just trying to give you a feel for what my perspective of the environment was. Like it was this beautiful, inclusive community where the scariest thing was once you were part of it, because once you got to be a part of it, then you were you had volunteered to do your part to uphold and help push this tradition forward. You were responsible for learning and internalizing the history and adding your own voice to the language, and that's a very difficult thing. Just as a young person, to find a voice, to recognize, but along with that, with the wise words of the elders. I remember Elvis Marcellus once said, and I don't think he wasn't talking to me, I just happened to hear him say it. He said the hardest thing for a young musician to do, and Alvin Baptiste, the great clarinetist, he co-signed it. The hardest thing for a young musician to do is to recognize that you have to accept the way you sound, and you work with that. He said, and then and what Alvin was saying is your voice is already there. You just have to sort of reconcile the difference between the sound of your voice and the sound that your imagination's ear is telling you want your voice to sound like. And once you reconcile the difference and stop fighting against yourself, you can then build on the sound that is yours. And Ellis used to tell us all the time, you are never going to play any better in this moment than you already play. So stop trying. Like right now, don't try to outdo yourself. Play. Let your preparation and your senses and your emotions and your understanding bring the best out of you in this moment. And if you don't like that, then you know what you need to work on for the next time this moment comes. But when you accept, when you just let what you have to offer, when you let that flow in this moment, that's when you hear cats say something like, I'm not sure if he had it all together, but man, I felt that shit. That's when, and that's a beautiful compliment to hear, because at no point in time, any of us who pursue excellence in improvisational music, at no point in time are we the best we're going to be, right? Clark Terry at 90 years old, was like in his 80s, sitting in Whitfield, like, Whitfield, I'm working on this today. It's a marathon, right? And so in the spirit of that statement, like I'm saying earlier, what the scariest thing is, oh shit, now I done fucked around and now I'm a part of this. I can't let myself down. I can't let all them down. And if I do, what does that mean, right? And so then, thank goodness, there were, you know, there have always been, and there will always be guiding lights. People, I'm just gonna. That's what I'm gonna call them. I'm gonna refer to these young musicians who come along, who are. You can characterize them however you want, but there will always be those who are way beyond who and what they're supposed to be. And what I mean by that is there is no explanation for how they play the way they do, their instincts, what they feel, how they express, how they share, yet and still it exists. And that was Roy. I met Roy Hargrove, he was 17, 18 years old. And I'm going to tell this story, even though this is no disrespect to the Hargrove family, but I saw we were standing outside of Bradley's, and he came in where he had a suit on that looked like he had been in his big brother's closet. His big brother played in the NBA, and he's like, man, and he's like, man, don't laugh at my suit. He said, I had a gig and didn't have any clothes, so I borrowed Delfio's suit. Delfio was about 5 inches taller than him. So Roy had sleeves too long, pants too long. But when he pulled his horn out, that cigarette was made by Brooks Brothers, let me tell you. And you know, he was someone who always knew what tune to play to bring the room together, what to play to settle the band down, you know, how to bring the best out of us, you know, when not to. He just he was just right, and he didn't talk a lot, and certainly not in the context of being, you know, around the music. We all talked a lot, you know, not when we were just out hanging, but it was all, you know, for all the jokes and laughing and all the clowning, man, we got on that stage and it was serious business. Nope, you know, not one person was ever okay being a weak link, you know. And so I talk about Roy, I talk about McBride. And McBride was, you know, was the other side of that, because he was equally as gifted and instinctive. He was just playful in a joyful kind of way. It was never as serious to him. It was as real and as impactful and important to him as it was to anyone. But it just was something, he had a jovial, you know, a joyfulness about him that the heaviness of a moment could not impact. And Roy, by comparison, had a seriousness and a serenity that the levity of a moment wouldn't impact. You know, he was kind of always just here. You know, and I learned so much from them because I wasn't a musician like that, man. First of all, I was just someone who practiced a lot. And I don't mean that to be. I'm not trying to in any way diminish anything I may have done, but you know, when you stand next to somebody who can do some shit and hear some shit, imagine some shit you can't do, when you just like, I don't know what that is. We all know what that's like. And so I would be standing next to Christian and Roy, sometimes Antonio Hart, or whoever was playing, or sometimes Benny Green. I'd be like, okay, cool, great, moving right along, because I don't know what that is. I can't do that. I don't even know where that came from, right? I mean, Larry Clozier put together, he basically ran Roy's organization, right? And so, Larry brought me and Christian into the group. And so for a time before the Jazz Futures, we were just all a part of Roy Hargrove's group. And I got great memories from traveling the world with them. And then when George Wein wanted to put together a group featuring young trumpet players, I think his idea was to take Roy and put him with Marlon Jordan, who had already been on the road with his quintet opening for Wynton at the summer before doing jazz festivals. Marlon had a record on Sony. And this young musician who no one had heard of just yet, a guy named Nicholas Payton, I knew Nicholas because he was playing with Marcus Roberts' group, and I had seen Nicholas. He was 16. I went to see him play at. I went to see them because my boy Billy Kessel was playing with Marcus Roberts. They played at the Bottom Line, and me and Nick hit it off immediately. I was like, I don't know who this little dude is, but y'all better watch out. So George Ween had this idea of putting them all together. Larry's like, nah, y'all, I'm not sitting Roy up there every night for these guys to take target practice at him. And so what we're gonna do is, but if you want, you can have Roy's group, which is all of us, and then you can invite Marlon, and the cat that plays saxophone with him into the group. And his saxophone player at the time was Tim Warfield. So then it became, the 8-piece group, the Jazz Futures, right? And so we spent that entire summer of 91 on tour, first doing all at the time what was called the JVC Jazz Festivals here in the States, opening for Wynton and the Neville Brothers. And then we went to Europe that was the month of June. For the month of July, we went to Europe and we opened for Miles and different people for about a month. And then we finished up, we played the Playboy Jazz Festival. First, we'd done the one, we played obviously the one, one in LA. Then we went to Playboy on the Road. We did 2 concerts in Japan, which is, I'll tell you a hilarious sidebar story. So this is me now being up close and personal with literally all of our heroes, right? These festivals were just a collection of the greatest living jazz musicians and vocalists and all that, period, on the planet. But, by the time you got through 3 or 4, you've seen everybody, right? And so, but it was too much. So anyway, we're playing at the Tokyo Dome, right? Really, like we playing the Tokyo Dome, and the Jazz Futures. We were on the bill with George Duke, somebody else, and Nancy Wilson. And man, let me tell you something, boy, I had a crush on Nancy Wilson. So, when I first got into Berkeley, Javon Jackson, who was my roommate, he made a recording, a cassette recording of Nancy, Cannonball Nancy, Save You Love Me and all that. And I used to listen to that every night. Wish I knew what. So all right, so I see Nancy and I'm like, man, I gotta tell Nancy. Like whatever, I'm gonna go, And so she happened to kind of catch me staring at her. It was like, so I walked in, hi, Miss Wilson, blah, 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 blah. And I told her the whole story. And she said, what? And I was holding a program, for the concert building. And she'd be like, hold on a minute, because I was about to ask her for an autograph, which I never do, but I was going to ask her for an autograph. She said, hold on a minute, baby. And she motioned to her assistant, and she opened the bag, she took out a thing of red lipstick, and I was like, wait a minute. And she started, the mirror out, she started freshening up her lipstick, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, Nancy Wilson about to kiss me, oh my God. Right? And so and I'm just like, don't mess it up, just be cool, you're gonna be all right. And so she freshened up her lipstick, and then she looked at me and she said, and she grabbed my program and she kissed it inside and gave it back to me. Right? And so, and I was still like, and she stopped, she said, wait a minute, babe, did you think I was gonna kiss you? And I was like, she said, not yet, young man.
Oh man, that's beautiful. You're so late coming home.
She was like, oh my God, you missed that one, bro. So then after that, we did our final concert, which was Newport, and that's the live record. That's the Jazz Futures live record. And then from then on, we all went, in and out of our separate ways. But it was that summer, because we had all already recorded. That's kind of what was the prerequisite to be in the Jazz Futures. I had a record out on Warner's, Christian, Benny Green. Benny Green had 2 records out on Blue Note, but it featured Christian and Carl Allen. So they, and Carl had already been, so, Roy and obviously Roy and Antonio had recorded, Marlon and Tim had recorded. And so, but it was that summer that set everything off. And there were moments, we all had a moment thank goodness, where somebody important saw us doing something. I remember the guy who was managing me at the time was friends was very close with Bob James. They had a long history, and I think Bob had heard, something about me, and whatever he had initially heard or seen, he wasn't impressed. But he happened to be at the Saratoga Jazz Festival when we hit and walked in on a good moment, and I rocked the entire crowd with a solo. And so from that moment on, I was on his radar, which came back to help quite a bit during my tenure at Warner Brothers and going forward, and those aren't, in a vacuum, you might not consider those, big deals. But the thing about it is, back then, every part of the recording industry was part of the recording industry, and the recording industry was a conglomerate, and they controlled everything. There was no independent, and so. It was just a matter of having allies, recording companies were banks, they loaned you the money to make a record, but they also prevented you from taking out a loan and making your own and doing anything with it, because you can make your own record, but unless one of their distributors then agreed to present it, and then you'd go to the vendors, and unless they were positioned properly, you could forget it. Like there's a trumpet player who I've been friends with for years named Farris Whitfield, and I remember when his first record came out, I was already recording for Warner Brothers maybe a year or two, and every time I go to a record store, I see his stuff in the bin in front of mine. So I would just be like, switch.
Like that sometimes.
I put so many Farris Whitfield CDs behind mine. Oh my God! I basically told every city I went to, I'll be like, which Whitfield? Nothing to see here, nothing to see here. But it was, it was just that. But that's just what it was, And so every moment, every opportunity we had to meet people, to make allies along the way. And as young jazz musicians, we needed that because we didn't have a lot of other access to movers and shakers, people who had real clout in the business. We were, at some point during that summer, I got an invitation from Quincy Jones to Christian. So me, Christian, and Carl Allen were playing a trio gig. A funny story. So we played a trio gig in Milan at the Jazz Festival. It was outdoors. We had the big arch. Whatever, and I tell a story. I was telling some boxing fans the other night. So, like I said, without the internet, you definitely were always up on where everybody was and who they were, what was going on. But this was not too long after Marvin Hagler had retired from boxing because he was pissed that he said he got robbed. He was done. So apparently he moved to Italy and he was working in the movie industry. Right? I remember that. So we playing outdoors in Milan. And and it's a nice crowd, and people having a good time. And there's one black dude, and he's way in the back, and he's making all kinds of noise. And I'm just like, what's wrong with this dude, man? And then he's yelling, he plays some George Benson, record, blah 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 blah. And I was just like, oh man, So anyway, whatever, the show's over. The dressing room was a tent next to the stage, right? So we back there, cool. Man, don't the security guard just let this dude right back in there? Man, so he comes in, got two girls with him, and he comes in, and he's about my size, and how some people, I'm a tapper, like I say something, I tap, it's just all one thing. But this cat, every time he said something, he's like, yeah, we're supposed to, and you, and I'm like, and everybody else is, and it ain't no thing. And I'm looking at this dude like, hey man, first of all, I'm like, you're not that much bigger than me, why'd you bruh? Thinking to myself, okay, if this cat hits me one more, and so I turned with my intention of making a fist, and I looked, and at that moment, I saw he had a golden boxing glove hanging from a chain around his neck, and I was like, oh shit, it's Marvin Hagler. And so so he stopped and he looked at me, and everybody else, he's like, man, was you thinking about punching me? And I was like, no. You better be happy you didn't do that because I'm not really good with that response. I'd have heard ding pop. And the parent was like, yo, you didn't know that was heckling? I'm like, no, I had no idea. Did you see me getting uptight? He was like, yeah, but I think if you just spray it, I almost got killed. That was almost the end right there. But I got an invitation that the next day to go we had some time off. Jazz Futures. I got an invitation the next day to fly to Montreux because Quincy Jones was conducting the Count Basie Orchestra he was doing a live he was playing the entire album of Smackwater Jack live with the Count Basie Band. And so Frank Foster was there, but Frank Foster was going to be playing in the section, and Quincy was conducting it. He had Clark Terry and Plas Johnson, Shaka Khan, Rochelle Farrell, George Benson, and George Duke as his guests, and me, right? And so I'm not really sure. I guess I was supposed to be Eric. I don't know what my part was going to be. So I was just trying to stand in the shadows, right? But we got to playing on when they started playing Manteca. It was a feature for George, for Benson, and George Rosie. He said, "Hold on." I was like, "Hey, Q, why don't you let the kid play something after me?" And so I was like, "Yeah, the kid." He went, "Damn it." So I was like, "Yeah." So he was like, "Oh, okay." So then we got to. So now this video has been floating. It's around a lot now on Instagram, right? So anyway, I never forget this. So we're playing the tune, and I thought I'd gotten off easy because it seemed like George forgot that he asked for me to play. Right? So the solo section came, and he was playing and stretching and playing, and then he just started kind of like coasting, like he was waiting for Quincy to come in to bring the band back in with the head out, with the next section. And everybody was like, "When you asked for the kid," George was like, and George was facing Q, and I'm here, right? And so Q was like, he looked at me, and he was like, you start. And so he was like, "Ladies and gentlemen, George Benson." And so George was like, "Yeah." And I came right in, and George was like, "Whoa, hey." And he's like, "Oh shit, that's right. I asked for this," right? But first of all, I wasn't gonna play long. And this is so, any musician would say this is as disrespectful as it could be if it wasn't for the fact that he asked for it, and I was like, "You never go up and play right behind him. Are you kidding me? You get cut in the alley outside after the gig for doing that." So I got to come behind my all-time hero and then play right up. So I'm like, well, I'm gonna play real short. So I came in with my best shit, played about 16 bars and got out, right, and luckily, he was happy for it. He was like, "Oh, what is," and I kept it short, got out the way, the whole thing, and when I walked off stage, I was still kind of shaking, Shaka Khan said, "Excuse me, young man." I said, "Yeah." She said, "Let me tell you something. I've been knowing George for a long time, and I've never seen anybody that can do this before." She said, "That's it. Go ahead. No standing around. Like, go ahead. That's all I want to tell you." But it's those moments that helped. You have a moment to do something. When the moment comes, you step in it, you put your foot in it, you do the best you can, and you get out. You're respectful. There's etiquette. I was aware of all those things. I've been at sessions, or at Smalls at the Fat Cat. I remember one night I was at the Fat Cat playing with somebody, or no, I brought, Davis was young, so I remember bringing Davis to the Fat Cat to sit in with somebody, and some trumpet player sat in on a tune, and he literally played like 3 or 4 minutes, and finally the band just stopped, and the dude was like, "Really? Is it that much to ask? Is it that much to ask for y'all to have to listen to me play for 4 minutes?" And I was like, "Yeah, dude, what the hell is wrong with you? Sit your ass down, play a couple of courses and sit down." And he's like, I'm like, "Well, yeah, like, you want to fight about that? Okay, like, you may not like hearing it, but bro, like, really? There's no etiquette whatsoever? Like, it's just a thing." I'm like, "Yeah, it's too much to ask." But so I'm grateful for all of those frightening moments and for all the things I experienced, because it prepared me to do my best and to fare well in situations that were going to mean a lot for me in the future. And so the Jazz Futures and that period was everything for me. and you know, and it established myself, going forward. I'm still here because of it. You know, I'm still here because of the lessons I learned, the way I established myself at that point, and then for the opportunities that I had to build on that going forward. And so I have always been grateful, and I will forever be grateful to have been there, been a part of it, and to have interfaced and worked with so many of those wonderful young musicians at the time who inspired me. It's funny. I don't know how many people at this point are aware of who Stephen Scott is, but Stephen Scott was a brilliant piano player, is a brilliant piano player, who still works a lot. But we were at Verve together. I remember, back playing with Betty Carter together, right? And I was just sitting in because my brother-in-law at the time, Troy Davis, played drums in the band and Stephen was playing. And I said, and Stephen, little things like he said, everything you play is in one direction. It's all chromatic motion. You ought to try and play, and it's funny. It's funny. It may sound, real. It sounds interesting now, but like you're working on something, and then that becomes the thing that you can't not do, right? And so everything becomes that until it moves on. And so just that one statement, it bothered me that it was noticeable enough for someone to say something more than it did that he said something. And I was like, oh, he's like, yeah, man, what about some more arpeggiated emotion? What about something besides that? And my initial instinct was to start telling him all the problems I had with his playing. But instead I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna take that away. You won't be able to say that no more. It's things like that from people, who were accomplished enough for their opinions to matter. And when I say accomplished, I don't mean important, like he had gigs with this one. I just meant I respected the way that he played, and I appreciated the time and the effort that he put in, and the knowledge he clearly had about the music we played. So when and Stephen wasn't one to just run around saying shit. So I knew for him to make that comment, it came from the best place, and it was up to me to make the best of it. And so that's what I did. And and it's moments like that and opportunities like that that have given me, that why, I'll be 57 in October, man. I'm still out here playing, and that's why.
Man, that's so beautiful to hear, man. Thank you for giving us that like real, like you made us feel like we were there with you. Yeah, man. It's crazy because there's a young guitar player here who wanted to meet you. I don't know if he's still here. Kirsten? Oh, he left. Wow. So Nicholas and Joshua Jennings, those are some people here. If they have a question, we're gonna open it up to them, and then
yeah, for sure.
Gonna try to close it up from there. Nick,
all right.
Joshua?
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, sorry, my bad. Josh, you can go first. You got it.
Oh, word. Okay, cool. I was wondering, what was it like in the scene in New York? Well, I'm from New York, so I was just wondering, what was the climate like outside of music? Like, just on a regular day, hanging in your apartment, and, what was it like?
Well, we're talking about 1987, right? Fort Greene in Brooklyn. I lived around the corner from the original Spike Lee 40 Acres and a Mule store. So like, I had a unique perspective on urban life because my father and one of my elder brothers were both retired members of the NYPD. My father had served in the Marines in World War II, and then come back from that and eventually joined the NYPD and he retired the year that I was born, 1966, right? And so then one of my elder brothers, all three of my brothers served in Vietnam. And my brother David, when he came back, he joined on. And at this time, when I had gotten out of school and I'm moving back to Brooklyn, he owned a brownstone in Fort Greene on 376 Adelphi Street between Greene and Lafayette. And so I lived down the street from him in a little apartment for a little while until I could rented a floor from him in his brownstone. But he was an NYPD lieutenant, and so He was on the front lines of battling back then. And so, if you think relations between African Americans and people of color in general and the police are tense now, imagine what it was like before camera phones, right? You know, the everyday battles that people went through, that were just, if you weren't there, you didn't know. If no one was there to see it, it was just your story. We lived with all that. So life was different. But at the same time, you know, I'm grateful for having been young and fearless. You know, I used to get on the subway at the Lafayette station in Fort Greene at 9 o'clock with, you know, wearing a suit and tie with my guitar and an amp on a luggage cart, and take that all the way to 125th Street so I could play with Jack McDuff from 10:30 to 3 in the morning, right? On Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And then at 3 in the morning, walk back to that train station and take the train all the way back to Lafayette. And not even once did I have a problem. And I was fortunate in that way. It's not like anything about me was going to scare off somebody who had malintent. It's just, it's a certain, you know, all I can say is, like, you know, I contrast that by I remember I had an audition for something at Carroll Studios, and Carroll was like at 49th and 10th, something like that. And I remember I got off the subway, I got off the A train at 42nd Street and 8th Avenue wearing a suit and tie around 4 o'clock. And I came up looking around. I happened to look over my shoulder. I saw these two dudes running at me. So instinctively, I just took off running. So I ran here. So here I am running down 42nd Street, running east on 42nd Street, made a left on 7th Avenue, ran up 7th Avenue. I looked over, they still behind me. So I ran up 43rd to 8th. I made the block twice. I ran past cops, people, nobody did shit. And finally the dudes, they just gave up. But, you know, like at 21, they weren't about to catch me. But, you know, New York was heavy. It was rough. Socially, it was interesting. I think one of the things that served me well, I will have no way of knowing this for sure, but I feel like one of the things that served me well was my attitude and awareness of the fact that you attract the energy that you incite. And so because I wasn't looking for conflict, I wasn't a combative person, I was just trying to live my life and do my thing and let people do theirs. I think that served me pretty well in that way. And, you know, I always tried to, always maintained an attitude of, you know, being helpful and doing what I could for people, you know, and welcoming that sort of assistance. But man, life in the 80s in New York was real. You know, I mean, when Flavor Flav's joint 911 is a Joke in Your Town came out, shit, we lived that. You know, my personal experience might have been different had it ever come up because I had law enforcement in the family. I don't know, but you know, that's just me. That's got nothing to do with that. Got nothing to do about with my neighbor. You know, I remember the guy next door to me lived next door to me on the block. You know, his son got shot in the kneecap. You know, playing handball at the park at Fort Greene Park. You know, that was a part of life. And listen, I'll tell you something kind of sad, but also something funny. You know, my brother Dave got tired of me on the train all hours of the night, so he insisted that we go to a police auction, and he bought me we bought a car. So I got a 1978 Buick Skylark. Now at this point, that car's 10 years old, right? After about 2 or 3 weeks, it only cost me $300, right? After 2 or 3 weeks, the transmission died. So one day I'm out there trying to, you know, here come a crackhead with a shopping cart. Hey man, I think your transmission's dead. Really? Okay, genius. So anyway, he's like, nah, man, I'm a mechanic. And I was like, oh, this is gonna be hilarious. He's like, man, look, I can change your transmission for $28. Man, you can't, whatever. He said, I'll be here 9 a.m. Saturday morning. So I got $28 just to see if this is gonna happen, right? So this cat, 9 in the morning, Saturday shows up with a shopping cart. He says, you know, I need, I don't know, $10 up front. I'm like, oh, here we go. But you know, I'm determined to see what's going to happen, right? So I gave him the $10. And my brother and I sitting outside on the steps like, yeah, man, you'll never see this cat again. But there was a junkyard. So you walk straight on the Delphi, straight down, past Decal, past Myrtle, whatever. And there's a junkyard under the BQE at the time, right? Now it's probably condos or some shit, but it was a junkyard back then. And so the $10 was to bribe the security guard. So he went in and, he found another GM late model, car with the same engine and stripped the transmission out. About an hour. So he came back with all that shit in the shopping cart. Could not believe it. He put my car on blocks right in front of me and worked all day long. Finally, we just stopped watching him. So about 6 o'clock, he knocked on the door. We came out. He was like, "It's done." I'm like, "Man, you got to be kidding me. I know it ain't done." So I came outside and got in it, and it was automatic, obviously, but the shifter was on the floor. Park, reverse, neutral, drive. So I'm doing like this, and it was just going back and forth. It wasn't catching nothing. I was like, "Man," he said, "Oh, my bad. I think I can tell you, I didn't grab the cable that connected the shifter to the thing. So I rigged it. So you got to turn the whole steering column. So I had to reach behind the wheel and grab the steering. I could just park, reverse, neutral, drive, L. But that shit worked, right? So I gave him $18, $28 change, but that was what New York was like. I could be at the Blue Note, watching McCoy Tyner and Elvin or something, and but the next day I could be getting my transmission changed for $28 by a crackhead on the corner, or you could buy one of those. You'd be at was it Bowery and Bowery and Houston was a popular intersection where you pull there and be a line of crackhead salesmen, right? They don't have everybody have a VCR box and perfectly sealed. For $10 you buy that brand new VCR. You know how many folks went home with a brand new box of cinder blocks. That was life in New York. We survived somehow, though. We survived.
So Joshua Jennings, I'm sorry, Nick.
Yeah. I had a question. So like the environment of like the music scene, like back then and now, like what are some things that like all of us here could take away that would help us in this environment now?
Well, so the interesting thing about it is, for as different from a distance as the way we play music now may seem from the way we played music then, the interesting thing is the differences in the scene at the time were the same. So when you think about the young folks that are playing, who are driving the current sounds of music today, people who are young playing young cats with record deals and doing things and getting attention, doing things. The many differences you see amongst the different scenes of cats playing today, that sort of division has always existed. And not always in a non-contentious way. Sometimes, I can remember several occasions where I thought Winton and Lester Boyd were going to go to blows. Me and Russell were actually in Bradley's the night that Betty Carter and Cecil Taylor had a fight. Betty Carter had won a Grammy, and so when they were interviewing her in Downey, she blamed Cecil Taylor and musicians like him for ruining jazz. In print, she said that. And so we sitting there at Bradley's, and me and Russell were sitting there with Javon Jackson playing, and me and Russell were sitting there with Betty talking, and Cecil Taylor walked in, and me and Russell was like, "Hey, wait, it's gonna be good." You know how Russell talks. And so I was like, "Yeah, man." And so when Cecil walked by, Cecil's a little dude, when he saw, and Betty was kind of stocky, So Cecil walked, he looked at it, he was like, singing bitch, and he walked by and sat down, and I was like, "Oh shit." And she and Betty said, "Shit, blues playing motherfucker." And then so I was like, "Well, it's about to get heavy." And then so Cecil said, "You out of tune singing bitch." And then Betty stood up and said, "You swinging, no piano playing, no harmony, no motherfucker." And he ran up and got in her face, and she jumped on him. Betty took him down. Oh, in this corner, we're from Detroit. Betty took him down, baby. We had to pull off him. And I was so proud of her that day. But you know, like, you know, and the interesting thing was, whether they realized it or not, they both stood for the same sort of individuality and freedom from confines, just through a different lens. It would take, you know, it would take longer for someone like me to, you know, to even bother to try to put it in perspective. But what I'll say about the difference in the scene, one thing I want to, so I'm saying all that is backstory for this. First of all, never allow your awareness in the moment to be the one you're stuck with. Like when you hear something or feel something or experience something, the way that it impacts you right now is important. Be mindful of it, be aware of it, be in the present. But don't limit yourself to that understanding for good. Because the beauty comes from what you can, for me, what's available is what happens when you relive that moment, when that information simmers, and when you can reflect on it and see it from a different perspective, oftentimes a bit more objectively. That's, you know, the real knowledge comes from the things you get in the cracks, not from the obvious, from what's obvious. And so always look for the things that connect us, as opposed, I say that unapologetically, always look for the elements that connect us as opposed to the things that divide us, because it's the connections that we will draw on going forward. The things that divide us will fall away, right? It's the things that connect us that are the most important, and that's where music and our scene in, you know, mimics life in general, you know, to me. And so that's the most important thing. And